Excellent. Thanks so much. Good morning and Happy New Year. Thanks everyone for joining. For folks who don't know me, I'm Allison Kretzinger. I'm our Director of Public Affairs here at DCYF, and I'm joined by my colleague, our Chief Financial Officer, Renee Newkirk. And we are doing our sort of annual session preview, Governor Budget Investment Overview webinar. So folks who are interested, which we appreciate your interest and are so glad you're here, have an idea and understanding of what was funded in the governor's budget and sort of what we anticipate heading into the legislative session, which starts Monday. I am so excited. I'm probably the only person who is so excited about session starting Monday, but I live for this time of the year and I'm thrilled to be in Olympia and be on the ground with my colleagues doing legislative work. So with that, if we want to go ahead and go to the next slide, little format about today. I'm going to do an overview of sort of timelines, history, our principles, priorities, realities. And then Renee and I are going to split sort of walking through the governor's investments, both in response to our decision packages and agency request legislation, as well as other investments and staffing investments. We'll have time for questions throughout. And at the end, we are using webinar format. There is a question and answer format. Please use that. You can type in your questions there. We will answer the ones we can live or type answers back. Otherwise, we'll correlate, we'll collect all the ones we aren't able to answer on the fly and follow up with answers to those as well. So just as a reminder to ground us in timelines and what is happening, where are we at in the process? The legislative session convenes Monday. The governor released his budget a couple of weeks ago, just right before the holiday, I think December 15th, if I remember correctly. So we've had a couple weeks to analyze that, and really that sets forward the agency playbook as we head into the legislative session, what we're working on, what we're talking with lawmakers about, what were the priorities we are hoping to move forward and have the legislature make investments in. As a reminder, the DCYF process for this started a long time ago. It started well beyond 12 months ago as we began building our biennial asks and working towards them. We submitted them to the governor's office in September, and then really the governor's office takes and OFM take the fall to contemplate our and every other state agency and agencies' requests and build out their budget for the next biennial session, or the next biennial timeline, which will start in July. So this timeline is just really intended to depict how all three of these entities, state agencies, Gov's office and OFM, as well as the state legislature, intersect with each other throughout this time. You want to go ahead and go to the next slide. As DCYF set forward in developing our priorities, and as we do every year, we have guiding principles that guide our work and guide our direction. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I will highlight a couple. The first being that our foundational strategic priority is reducing and eliminating ethnic disparities that exist in our systems. And so we have that in mind as we are thinking about asking for new things, new investments, law changes, etc. It's core foundational priority that guides our analysis and our work. We also have a strong orientation to and desire to prevent what we call system penetration. We want to be upstream in supporting families and prevent penetration into the deeper ends of our system. So this is another thing we're looking for as we think about our asks and our investments. And this is a biennial setting legislative session. The lawmakers are going to come to town and set a biennial operating budget that will guide our state for the next 2 years. It is a long session. So with that, this is the moment to introduce big concepts, new ideas, bold initiatives. And so you see some of that in what we put forward and what the governor ultimately made choices around and funded. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. Just a quick reminder of our strategic priorities at DCYF that guide our work. Again, won't read them all to you. More information is on our website about our strategic plan, but these are our priorities that really guide our work. You can go to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about what to expect. So as I've noted, this is a budget setting session. It is a long session. It runs 105 days starting on Monday through the end of April and is really the time for lawmakers to set the vision for the state for the next 2 and 4 years. We're going to be focused today on the 23-25 biennial budget asks. Lawmakers will also make tweaks to the current fiscal year supplemental, and they will look to project the out years. What we're really focused on today are those things that fall within that next biennial session, the 23-25 operating budget. Also important to note, DCYF has seen significant investments and significant policy changes over the last couple of years coming out of the pandemic, navigating through COVID, as well as just really remarkable law change in child welfare with passages of Keeping Families Together, the Guardianship Act, in early learning with the passage of the Fair Start for Kids Act, substantial investments there, in JR with the passage of the Community Transitions Program and closure of one of our 3 institution facilities. We have seen significant changes that we are implementing, continue to implement, and will continue to implement, and investments that came along with that. We'll note some of those investments, many of those investments were one time as part of federal relief for COVID. So we are still grappling with what the reality looks like coming out of the impacts of COVID and a pandemic, and sitting on investments that were one time or investments that were in response to that. And what does that mean as we head forward? Lots of question marks there. We know that economic recovery, COVID recovery has not landed equally for all. We know that we have clients we serve, families we engage with, providers we work with that are still struggling day to day to meet their economic needs, keep their doors open, hire, retain workforce, struggle with that as well as an agency. So we are seeing sort of mixed response to this recovery and sort of this next era that we're in. And with that is also some of the economic realities that are coming. And I'm going to let Renee talk a little bit about sort of the economic picture for the state. And then we'll dive into some of the realities, some of the session preview.
Thank you, Allison. Good morning, all. Yeah, just some level setting. Just wanted to note that the Economic and Revenue Forecast Council is projecting a very slight increase in comparison from the current biennium going into next biennium, but that increase is significantly less than what we're seeing in inflation. So what the governor did in his budget is there was actually to transition from pandemic challenges, the legislature created a new reserve called the Washington Rescue Plan Transition Account. And so the governor proposes using $2.1 billion from that newly established reserve account last year to help address the needs identified in his budget going into this next biennium. So that's really important to note, just to set expectation that if the legislature doesn't make some similar assumptions rather, then we may not see the level of investment that is included in the governor's proposed budget. As we'll review with you today, as DCYF, we are very, very happy with the governor's proposed budget. We received more investment than quite frankly, we were expecting to receive, which we are very, very excited about, but just also acknowledging that we may not see that same level of investment in the enacted budget if similar choices aren't made in the enacted budget. So just wanted to sort of set that expectation as we go through this, because we are very, very pleased with the governor's budget, very, very excited about it. So, okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So as we get in to this presentation, just wanted to note how this is formatted. So you'll notice on the upper right-hand corner, we flagged if our decision package was partially funded or fully funded. All of the decision packages that we submitted back in September were either partially or fully funded. So again, very, very excited about the level of investment in the governor's proposed budget, because we did receive some level of investment for every single decision package that we had submitted. And so just wanted to note that that's how this is structured. So the first one that I'll review is our prevention decision package that we submitted. And so we submitted this investment request to address the interventions to reduce the number of families entering into child welfare and to promote child and family well-being. This decision package included an SUD, substance use disorder, multiple components of that, and every single component that we had requested for substance use disorder was funded in the governor's proposed budgets. So all of these, as you can see here noted under the components requested, the network of substance use disorder professionals across the state, expanding plan of safe care statewide, expanding pregnant and parenting intake pilot. All of these will address and hopefully reduce the number that we're seeing coming into foster care. The strikeout that you'll see, also a format, is what was not funded in the governor's budget, but we had requested in a decision package. So strengthening families locally, this is to address maltreatment. This was not funded in the governor's budget. Home visiting expansion, this was funded in the governor's proposed budget. This provides an increase of approximately 160 to 200 home visiting slots. The governor also provides a 30% increase to help address workforce investments and overall cost increase of the home visiting program. And then there were some other infrastructure and IT solutions that we had requested that were not funded, but the more sort of significant components, I would say, our priorities rather of the home visiting, we're very excited to see expansion and workforce investments funded. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is actually a capital request that we submitted. Rising Strong is a holistic family-centered drug treatment and housing program that we currently have on the east side of the state. It is a very successful and thriving program. It really keeps families together while treatment is being received. And so we would like to see this on the west side. So we submitted a capital request to build the building construction of this so that we can bring Rising Strong to the west side of the state. And just a little bit more about this program. What we see for the parents is detox, SUD treatment, counseling, recovery coaching, parenting skills, while children there receive quality childcare, educational support, and mental health screening and treatment. So again, really thriving in Eastern Washington. Would love to see this on the west side. So this capital request was fully funded, included in the governor's proposed budget. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Combined in-home and transition services, this decision package was partially funded in the governor's budget. So again, with this, sort of the common theme that you'll see is really preventing children from coming into out-of-home care. So we had requested capacity building grants so that we have the ability to bring on new providers or expand existing providers to grow and really help meet the needs of our combined in-home services to really prevent the entry into foster care. So our capacity building grant component of this was funded. And then with providing additional providers, bringing on new providers and the expansion, we also would then need additional funding to grow and expand the actual services provided for combined in-home. So that component of the decision package was also funded. We had also requested an expansion of independent living program that was not funded. But then we had also requested a LifeSet expansion, which really is focused on 17 to 22-year-olds and the transition from the JR system and the foster care system into adulthood, transitioning out of those programs. That was funded for the maintenance in King County and Yakima with the expansion of 6 additional counties. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Caregiver placement supports. This decision package was partially funded. And some of these, when I say partially funded, it's like it was mostly funded. So as you can see, we had requested 53.94 million. And of that, about 52 million of it was funded. So this was largely funded. So caregiver placement supports, the goal of this decision package that we had submitted was really to provide supports to all caregivers, whether it's licensed, unlicensed, and then also a component of this is to provide some supports equity for licensed caregivers as well. So really the goal of this was to reduce, again, number of children in out-of-home care and create equity in financial supports for caregivers. So we had proposed to move from a 4-level foster care maintenance payment system to a 7-level maintenance payment system based on an analysis of RDA. And so the governor fully funds that. And then in addition to that 7-level system for foster care, also just a new placement supports to all caregivers. So again, licensed or unlicensed. And supports include things such as educational advocacy supports, childcare, navigation, respite, in addition to, for higher level needs, some behavioral health treatments. So again, that creates equity in our system and supports to all caregivers. So again, very happy to see this included in the governor's proposed budget. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Family time. In family time, we had requested to expand the network administrator model that we currently have in regions 1 and 2 and to expand this statewide. That was not funded in the governor's budget at this time. We had also requested funding for separate billables. So separate billables are items such as reports required by the court, reports that we require of our providers for no-show or canceled visits. And so that was funding included in the governor's proposed budget. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. DS compliance. This was a decision package that we had submitted to come into compliance with a settlement agreement to address the instability through night-to-night placements that our youth are seeing, and for those youth staying in hotels and overnight stays in our DCYF offices. So this was fully funded. There's multiple components in the settlement agreement. So I'll quickly go through those. The Emerging Adulthood Housing Program. This request was for housing and case management supports to ensure stability and to prepare youth for independent living. The professional therapeutic foster care. This requires DCYF to develop and implement a professional therapeutic foster care contract and licensing category. The statewide hub home model program. This is an expansion of our current hub home model. Also required to revise our licensing standards. Family group home planning. This requires us to improve and revise the shared planning meetings and our family team decision-making policies and practices. Referrals and transitions. We are to develop a new referral and transition protocols. Referrals we have found are not consistent for trauma-informed and culturally responsive, and particularly they are not reaffirming for the LGBTQIA+. Qualified residential treatment program. This requires assessments of the QRTP placements. And then we're also required to develop an implementation plan to implement all of these measures and to monitor them. And so this was fully funded in the governor's budget. Licensed kinship placements. This is strictly a staffing request that was fully funded. Kinship Caregiver Engagement Unit was a component of this request and was funded. We were funded for 7 FTEs to expand and really finalize sort of the statewide implementation of this program. The Kinship Caregiver Engagement Unit helps our KIM families navigate through the licensing process. And then also we received FTE to maintain our licensing staff ratios, in particular with the implementation of 1227 with the initial licenses that are available for those kin families that plan to become licensed and meet some of the health and safety requirements. Then will be issued an initial license and we can pay up to 90 days. Okay, we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next 2 slides are really IT investment. So CWIS is our comprehensive child welfare information system. This is essentially our case management system for child welfare. We have started a feasibility study. So this funding allows the completion of the feasibility study. Then we'll follow up with a future decision package request to implement the case management systems. This is just for the completion of the feasibility study to determine what the cost of the system would be. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. SSPS replacement, similar to CWIS. This is a IT request for a feasibility study that has started. So for completion of this into next biennium, the SSPS system is a payment system, processes most of the early learning and child welfare payments. It's over a 40-year-old system and time for replacement. So this funding provides the completion for that feasibility study. Sort of another technical request that was fully funded in the governor's budget is a CCDF audit resolution. We have received a finding for the Child Care and Development Grant. This funds a large portion of Working Connections childcare. And so the state auditor's office would like to see some more detail. And so in order for us to provide the level of detail that the state auditor's office would like to receive, we need some IT solution investment as well as some staffing investment here. And so the governor fully funds that. Okay, so with that, I am going to turn it over to Allison.
Excellent. So I'm going to walk through. So Renee covered most of our child welfare priorities, or child welfare prevention related priorities, and our IT infrastructure pieces. I'm going to walk through some of our adolescent JR space as well as our early learning space, and then I'll kick it back over to Renee to talk about some other investments and staffing supports. Following the same format, we submitted a decision package related to housing access and supports, both for to prevent child welfare, to support reunification for families involved in child welfare, and some investments in our JR space as we think about housing for young people exiting our juvenile rehabilitation. We submitted that as a decision package, mostly funded. This decision package was mostly funded. And upon review of our request with our partners at OFM and the governor's office, it was concluded that we did need some agency request legislation that contemplates one part of it, which is the child welfare housing program expansion. So you will see a piece of agency request legislation that makes permanent the child welfare housing program and expands that to a prevention lens as well. Thrilled to see most of this decision package funded. Good flag, Renee. Next year we should do like partially, most, or not, because most of these were mostly funded, not partially is a little. Anyway, you get the point. So thrilled to see this funded, and we will have a piece of agency request legislation that does accompany this. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about two capital decision packages related to our JR facilities. The first, continuing around our priority and our strategic goals to create more opportunities in least restrictive and less restrictive environments. We are looking to expand our continued community capacity building, so have some resource requested to begin siting of two new community facilities, and one in Clark and one in Snohomish County. This is the first step of that process. It will be planning, feasibility work, site analysis. This is not purchase or construction of brick and mortar, but rather the first step in beginning to understand what's available, where those could be, what that looks like. So thrilled to see that. Additionally, as we think about next steps as it relates to continued less restrictive environments, we want to establish transitional living centers on our two institutional campuses, one at Echo and one at Green Hill. As we think about the needs of the population that those campuses serve, having a space on campus where young people can come to and still be connected to that institutional setting, the care, the rehabilitation, the medical, but also have the ability to be off campus working, attending school if that meets their need. We really need to establish two different type of living facilities on those campuses. And so this decision package is invests in a TLC at each of those facilities, and we're thrilled to see that. And if we want to go to the next slide, as we think about the needs at Echo Glen specifically, this is a campus that serves a wide range of populations, from some of our youngest male residents, as well as all of our female residents. And they have varying degrees of sentences and security needs that came with their sentence. And so we need to make some enhancements to this facility to create more freedom of movement, create more safety and accountability. And so you see a variety of Echo-specific security enhancement investments here, including partial perimeter fencing that will allow those TLCs to sit outside of a secure fence, but still access that, as well as enhancements to video surveillance, motion detection, etc. So these are capital, both fully funded in the capital budget. Also related to our juvenile rehabilitation population, we have been partnering with OSPI and stakeholders for a couple of years on work to improve educational outcomes. Thrilled to see the leadership and the legislature of Representative Callan in this space, and have been thrilled to be part of this. And so that task force and work group culminated with some recommendations that were released this winter. So we have an accompanying decision package for our needs. So education delivery and institutions into our JR population is a joint effort across DCYF, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, as well as local school districts. And so this is really about what do all of those systems need? And our ask here, our decision package, is about what does DCYF need to ensure that our young people have access to education delivered on their campus, that we have proper staffing, we have proper technology, we have proper ability to govern and support the collaboration of that. And so thrilled to see this funded, and anticipate some conversation with the legislature this year about other things needed in the education space, and thrilled to be able to weigh in and work on those as well. So that really concludes our JR space this year. Again, lots of work happening from previous years underway there. So I'm going to flip now and talk about some of the early learning investments. DCYF put forward really, really large and ambitious investments in our childcare and our preschool space. We believe these are the right next steps that build on the strong work of the Early Start Act, the Fair Start for Kids Act, and some of the other investments that have happened, the Child Care Collaborative Task Force, et cetera. And so the governor had a lot to consider in this space, and I don't envy the position he and his staff were in. We put forward two pretty robust packages, one focused on continuing support for families, the other on providers. You'll see here that one element of the family-focused package was funded, removing the homeless grace period barrier and creating extension so families who are still working to mitigate homelessness have continuity of childcare. Thrilled to see that part of this funded. If we want to go to the next slide. The provider-focused package, the governor's budget funds two really important elements, increasing both the grant programs that were funded as part of Fair Start for Kids Act. We saw huge demand for both the Complex Needs Fund grant application for childcare as well as the equity grants. And so we asked for more resource in both of those grant programs to meet the demand and the need, and thrilled to see that funded. So we'll see expansion of the childcare complex. We see expansion of childcare complex needs and equity grants in the governor's budget. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We also put forward a decision package on rate increases. The Fair Start for Kids Act contemplates language around the 85th percentile of the current market rate survey. We have a new market rate survey from when the rates were last established. And so our decision package comes in line with the rate increase there, the 85th percentile, as well as compliance feels like the wrong word, but as well as in alignment with the copay changes that come for families and increasing income eligibility. So thrilled to see this package funded, really in living into the next step that passed in the Fair Start for Kids Act a number of years ago. I guess a number of years ago, 2 years ago, it feels like an eternity ago. It's only been 2 years. Additionally, our family child care providers are represented by SEIU 925. And so they go through a bargaining process like all labor does throughout the spring and summer, culminating in collective bargaining agreements that are part of the governor's budget. And so some highlights of the collective bargaining agreement between the state and family child care providers through SEIU 925 include a rate increase for family, friend, and neighbor providers. Again, contemplates that 85th percentile of the market rate survey. That will be true for family childcare. And then our decision package that was funded funds that for centers. The collective bargaining agreement also includes the permanent waiving of background check application fees and fingerprint costs for family childcare providers and employees within family childcare, as well as it includes a cost of care rate enhancement, continues that was funded in the last collective bargaining agreement. And we see that in this collective bargaining agreement again as well. We want to go to the next slide. So the next slide is about ECEAP and making our way towards ECEAP entitlement. Again, another robust decision package here. We had a rate increase ask for school day and working day slots. That was a 40% rate increase. And I am elated to report that that was fully funded in the governor's budget. I mean, I will just take a moment and pause to say that feels largely unprecedented and speaks to a true testament to the commitment to supporting families, supporting slots that meet families' needs, and marching well on our way to being able to meet entitlement in a way that supports families and providers and offering high quality early learning opportunities. So thrilled to see that funded. We also see slot expansion, moving us closer to entitlement and expanding in slots, as well as we see investment in the complex needs specific to ECEAP. So we have a childcare complex needs, we have an ECEAP complex needs. Both of them have huge demand and both of them see investments. The ECEAP one sat in this decision package. Technical, largely, we are operating an organizational license pilot that came out of some work in the 2020 legislative session. We are 2 years into that pilot and recognize we need a third year as well as some work for implementation. So thrilled to see this item fully funded. And so we can continue that great pilot work and hopefully figure out some ways to build out that organizational license for childcare and early learning providers. Go to the next slide. Also a capital ask. DCYF submitted the decision package related to the Early Learning Facilities Fund. This grant program is actually administered by Commerce in strong partnership with the Department of Children, Youth, and Families with us here, and we're thrilled about that partnership and that work. We submitted a decision package that requested $50 million for the grant program, most of that being for facilities grants, part of that being for minor renovation. Thrilled to see the governor's budget included $40 million for the grant program and $5 million for the non-expansion minor renovation. I will also note there are $5 million in the governor's budget for school district projects specific to early learning. So although our DP was mostly funded at $45 million, we see an additional $5 million directly to school districts who are expanding capital early learning facilities, which is great. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Another strong priority of the department is continuing our work, obviously, in equity and access, language access. And so we have a pretty robust decision package that really brings us into, I was going to say the 21st century, but I would just say brings us into the right place as we think about access, language access for our clients, for our families, for our staff, for our providers, that does a variety of things related to a website, having language coordination and technical assistance available on site and in DCYF, specific to the wide array of programs and services we offer, as well as some staff training and data and reporting on language access for our clients. So thrilled to see this funded and really excited to be able to live into some of our values around what is right and what is right for families whose first language may not be English. Go to the next slide. So now I'm going to pivot and talk about our agency request legislation. DCYF submitted a couple pieces of agency request legislation that I'll talk through where those landed, as well as some agency request legislation that will be moving forward post-conclusion of the governor's budget process. We'd submitted agency request legislation and a decision package concerning background checks and licensing fees. I will note that the agency request legislation was not approved, but the governor's budget does invest in background check, continuing to waive background check fees for childcare providers for 1 more year, and does invest in the initial license maintenance payments. This is really a maintenance level step, but is an important next step in implementing 1227 and launching that initial license process for families in the child welfare system. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I am thrilled to report our guardianship assistance program agency request legislation was approved and funded. Very exciting. So this creates a state-funded guardianship assistance program that means children do not have to be and families do not have to be 4E eligible, which is an antiquated federal standard, income standard, that more and more families in Washington state and frankly across the nation are not meeting because the 4E threshold at the federal level has not increased. And so this will expand to cases beyond that previously limiting threshold, also extends to licensed caregivers, including foster parents and suitable others, and extends the guardianship expands eligibility to guardianships established by tribal courts and other federally recognized tribes. So really thrilled to see this really moves alongside our values and implementation, both of 1747, the guardianship bill that passed last year, but also really being able to support permanency for children who are placed with relatives where it doesn't make sense to terminate parental rights and move towards adoption, but provides that financial support for those families to maintain stability of placement and relationship and connection to community, to kin, to those that children have relationship with. So thrilled to be able to be working on this piece of agency request legislation this year with a wide group of stakeholders who provided robust feedback and supported this proposal. Additionally, we will be working on agency request legislation to expand and move forward, expand the Family Connections program. So this was a piece of legislation that passed a number of years ago. The years blend together. I can't remember if it was 2020 or 2021. I think it passed 1 year and was funded the next. But this will expand that, make permanent the Family Connections program. And so thrilled to be working on expansion of this with some of our partner agencies who have been implementing the Family Connections pilot program. Makes it not a pilot and expands it. So we need agency request legislation to do that. So those are the 3, and I mentioned the housing bill earlier. So in total, we'll have 4 pieces of agency request legislation we're working on, in addition to the nearly $1 billion of new investments coming towards the agency that we'll be carrying forward into the session. And with that, I'll turn it over to Renee to talk about some of the other investments that are in the governor's budget that weren't necessarily DCYF initiated.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, so what we saw funded in the governor's proposed budget is the continuation of a pilot in Pierce County. This pilot helps to prevent child abuse and neglect. SSI cost of care, we're seeing investment for us to develop a plan so that we can discontinue the practice of using SSI benefits to offset the cost of care in child welfare. Imagination Library, we see an investment here. This is the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, the booked giving program. So we saw that in the governor's proposed budget. Tribal early learning grant. So the governor in his budget includes one-time grant funding provided to tribes and tribal children to provide for culturally appropriate early learning opportunities, as well as other early learning opportunities. The Treehouse Graduation Success. This is an expansion of the current Treehouse Graduation Success program that we see here in the governor's budget. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So the next slide is some DCYF staffing. So I won't go over this in a lot of detail, but the governor does include in his budget a COLA increase for all staff. So that's a cost of living increase or otherwise general service salary increase of 4%. That's effective July 1st, with a 3% increase the following July 1st of 2024. Also included is a $1,000 lump sum payment for staff that are up to date on their COVID vaccinations and boosters. And then I also won't go into a lot of detail. There's some other staffing investment that we're seeing, such as staff that have a shift schedule. So not your standard 8 to 5 schedule. They're receiving $1.50 per hour increase. It's effective July 1st. 10% assignment pay increase for certain and specific social workers, a 5% premium increase for those JR staff in the 24/7 facilities. This is secured facilities as well as our community facilities. And those are just specific for staff working with direct care residents, patients, and clients. And then also a $1,000 lump sum payment just for retention and recruitment recognition for those staff, sorry, not recruitment, just retention of those employees who are with us on July 1st, 2022, and still with us July 1st of 2023 with no break in service. And then also the governor includes targeted salary increases for specific classifications that you see listed here. To sort of decode this, where you see a 2 range increase that equates to a 5% increase, and a 1 range increase equates to a 2.5% increase. So just specific to those job classes that you see here. I will note the governor included other job classes in his proposed budget. These here that you see listed are those ones that are the DCYF is impacted by in the staffing for their increases. And I believe, yes, that concludes our presentation here. Thank you all for joining us. Please feel free to use the Q&A if you have questions. And thank you so much for just being a part of this budget build process and seeing the success of that through the governor's budget. Again, we are so thrilled and excited with the governor's budget. We received just significant and more investment that we expected to receive. So again, just thank you. And Allison, I'll turn it over to you if you have some additional concluding thoughts.
Yeah, perfect. There's one question in the chat or in the Q&A that I'll read out loud, and then I'm not probably going to answer, but why isn't the COLA rate at the inflation rate? People are asked to do the same amount of work for effectively less equals more turnover. Good question. Definitely can't speak to sort of the realities of that. Much of that happens through the bargaining process and is led by the governor, and really DCYF is not sort of part of that. And so I appreciate the question and the sentiment, and unfortunately that is beyond above Renee and I's pay grade to weigh in on. Does the nursed home visiting suite of programs continue and or increase funding in the 23-25? The nursed home visiting, I assume you are probably talking about home visiting services in general and our evidence-based home visiting. So that is our prevention decision package that Renee covered. And we do see increases in the home visiting line of service, both in existing contracts to right size, invest in workforce, et cetera, but also expansion. So new slots, which means we will likely be bringing on new slots and potentially new providers there. But we do not see any reductions or any decreases to any of our home visiting services. Can you talk a bit about your coordination with folks in the governor's office around advocating for these items? Well, we don't advocate and lobby, we inform and educate. But certainly Renee and I work very closely with our OFM analyst, our governor's policy advisor, as well as leadership in the governor's office. I meet weekly with leadership in the governor's office who are also working on the Hill, and we'll work in tandem around that. We certainly have strategies and weekly lawmaker meetings and are weighing in on bill hearings, et cetera. But we try to stay as closely connected through weekly conversations, weekly check-ins, weekly meetings with the governor's office. And on this suite of priorities, but also I will say in response to other things that emerge that are not DCYF or Gov's office initiated, right? That's the beautiful part of democracy, is that we get to ask for things and you all get to ask for things and we get to respond to those things you ask for. Many of them we're aware of, which is delightful and have been weighing in on early and throughout the process, but we will remain coordinated with the governor's office, lawmakers, you all on those pieces as well. So appreciative of the relationships that exist through this process. We are thankful for DCYF's ask of the 40% increase for ECEAP. Can you tell us what you're hearing about the possibility of a 40% increase from legislators? To date, I've heard nothing. I have had the governor's budget came out on the 15th, which is really when we can start talking about things. I also then, and Renee went on vacation and I also got sick, which is not great. And it was the holidays and now it's the new year. And I imagine as session starts, we will hear more. But to date, I have not heard hide nor hair about where things are at, other than sort of the initial session preview that the Senate did yesterday, that was on a whole host of things, as well as you know, sort of the just current realities of the economic forecast. But great question. There's a comment in the Q&A about ECEAP eligibility aligning with working connections. Appreciate the comment, and we'll certainly take that into consideration in future asks. Does the new investment from the federal government under the block grants have to go through the legislature for disbursement? And I'm assuming you're talking about the Child Care Development Block Grant. There are multiple new investments, McV expansion, which is very exciting, and DCYF gets has a variety of federal funding sources. So I'll let Renee talk a little bit about process for sort of how those federal pieces get contemplated, if that makes sense, Renee.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Yes, definitely. The legislature will definitely choose how they would like to utilize that federal funding. They may or may not leave some of that up to the agency, or they may choose specifically how some of that federal funding will be utilized. So that really is a decision up to the legislature and how they choose to utilize that additional federal funding. Again, they may leave some of it sort of open to the agency, of course, while following federal guidelines, or they may direct us specifically to how it will be spent. That is entirely up to the legislature.
And I will just note, specific to early learning and the Child Care Development Block Grant and that increase, it is I've not talked to anyone about this, but it is true that Washington State has invested a lot of resource in early learning over the last couple of years, as well as put forward some policy goals and next steps in statute that you saw those in our decision package. Some of that was funded with one-time federal dollars. Some of that was funded with other sources of revenue. And so given there are already a variety of investments on the horizon for the legislature, I would not be surprised if the legislature makes choices around that Child Care Development Block Grant dollars and those increases to fund what they've already committed to do. I'll just be real transparent, real with you. Lots of resource on the table, or lots of ask for resource on the table, and the legislature is going to contemplate all of that. That's my reading of the tea leaves. I don't think they're gonna direct the agency to spin up new and different things in the early learning space with that increase. I'll be totally transparent, and I would be surprised if they did. When do we find out if the legislature approves the proposed extended RGAP eligibility? Great question. So timeline for the legislative process, it starts Monday and it runs through April. We will know at the end of April what bills have passed. Bills will then get signed into law by the governor. So the governor then has 30 days after session to contemplate and sign into law. And then that's when the budget is passed. So we will know at the end of April and throughout May, the beginning of May, what has passed or what has not passed. And that's when we'll have a sense of all things, including the expansion of the guardianship expansion program. well, there's a lull here of questions. Feel free to keep using the Q&A. I would just echo Renee's thanks for attending and partnership through this build. I am humbled and honored every time I get to do one of these to not only speak to the huge investments this year in the governor's budget that frankly makes my job way more enjoyable come Monday, but also just the ability to do that in a way and in such strong partnership with you all, with many advocates, stakeholders, providers, folks doing the work across the state. It makes this process so enjoyable and so much more fun. And so it is not to be forgotten, just the work that many of you on this webinar have put into informing these packages and proposals, building them, contributing to them. It doesn't go unnoticed, and it makes the process infinitely more enjoyable and frankly, somewhat easier when session comes around. So thanks for leaning into that as well this interim. There's a comment in the chat with a question. We're worried about early ECEAP. It looks like with new money, we'll have a slot. What's the latest on making sure we can keep serving kids? I don't know, Renee, if you want to tackle that one. I know there's been some preliminary conversation around next steps there, but not sure if there's been a decision made. And Katie, certainly hear your tone there. And I will just also say that's the beautiful part about the democratic process and leveraging your relationship with lawmakers, despite the fact it probably isn't something that I'll be actively talking about given where we're at right now, certainly doesn't prevent you and other providers and advocates from having that conversation with lawmakers as well. And I think we've provided some of that information.
Yeah, I don't have anything further really to add. This is still just under discussion.
Well, I certainly will hang on for 10 or so more minutes if there's more questions that trickle in, but recognize people may want to take 10 minutes to, I don't know, step outside and breathe fresh air or shake out your wiggles. Seeing more comments about focus on early ECEAP. Yep, hear that. As a reminder, these slides will be posted online on the DCYF website under the Government Affairs section. In addition, we have one-pagers about many of our decision packages that live there as well. If you need more information or want more details, as well as I should say, all decision packages are linked there that have all the details that what we submitted in September. So if you need more or desire more information, we'll direct you to that resource where this webinar and slides will be posted, as well as those decision packages and one-pagers. Yeah, we will. I see your comment about finding things on the website. I will send you a link. If I forget, remind me on Monday, Lori. All good, Lori. All good.
I am as well, Lori.
I'm just technology challenged in general.
I'm technology challenged.
All right. Well, not seeing more questions trickle in and seeing folks click off. Just want to again say thanks for attending, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. And those of you who are headed into session life on Monday, I will be right there with you and so excited. Say hi if you see me on campus, and can't wait. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank everyone. Bye.